if God's given you a desire for a family, then he's not going to give you a counterfeit.
Good.
Right?
Good job.
He's so good. He's good. I also don't believe there's one person for you. I think that's ridiculous thought.
Here we go. Okay,
a lot of words will be said today.
Yes. Exactly. Welcome to the Girls Podcast. I'm so excited to have you both here.
Aww.
And for our new family who doesn't know y'all yet, many of them do, but for those that don't know, these are two of my mentors, and it's so fun getting to stare at you saying this, Pastor Donna, Pastor Holly. Every girl, in my opinion, and I learned this from y'all, needs another woman who's gone before her, who speaks life over her, who checks her when she needs to be checked, who prays for her, who makes her feel seen, but also who goes before her and shares, these are the things that I did that were great. These are the things don't do. Right. And you are two of those women. Yeah. I think about, people say that I've had an impact on their life, and you both have had a part in every life that I've impacted because of how deeply and dearly you have impacted my life. I think about the phone calls, the text messages, the voice memos, the trips, the times that I've sat across from the two of you, and I still continue to sit across from both of you, and I'm grateful. Our church thanks you. My husband thanks you because I'm a better wife because of y'all and a better mom, and you both are so refreshing, and as a leader, I know that I don't have to believe the lie that I have to be perfect and have it all together. Because
she looked at us. Right, exactly. If God's using them and they're a hot mess, then
surely he can use me. Yes. But I just want to say thank you for your yes. Thank you for saying yes to ministry and leadership. Now we see people, girls in leadership, like all over the world. But I know there was a day when people would look at y'all cross-eyed because you had a word on your heart and you would enter rooms that many women had not entered before, and you paved the way and still are. And I'm just so grateful to get to have you today, and so grateful for the girls to get to know y'all because we're about to learn and grow and be encouraged.
Okay.
We just adore you.
Yes, we do.
And think you're pretty extraordinary.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we do.
It's much of an honor for us to be here in this conversation with you. Yeah. So thank you.
There's no better encourager than Oneka.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah, you're the queen.
I'm standing on y'all's shoulders, and I'm thankful that you've held my hand and kept me close. But that's my introduction of y'all. Will y'all share a little bit about yourselves before we jump in? Just like your story of ministry, leadership, when God called you, because we're going to talk about today staying the course and not quitting. Okay. And there's plenty of reasons in this day and age, in this crazy world that we live in, to quit, to give up, to feel like your life doesn't count and it doesn't matter. And both of you have continued to stay the course with beauty, grace, strength, tenacity, plus you're just fun. And so we're just going to jump into the conversation. But before we do, tell a little bit about yourselves and your journey and what you've seen and why you've stayed the course. I know it's a lot. Wherever you want to jump in.
A micro capsule.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I gave my life to Christ when I was just 20. I was in college. It was a hot mess before that. And my husband was...
Capital H, hot mess.
Yeah, capital H, hot mess, exactly. You know the story.
Yes.
I mean, it was pretty miraculous that I met Jesus the way I did. And the church that I started going to, my husband was the youth pastor. And since I was just past the age of youth, he started mentoring me and started speaking into my life and fell in love with me.
Wow.
And then we got married. And from that point, we knew we knew he was called to ministry. Okay. So back in that day, you didn't really see husband and wife teams like you do, like you guys are functioning. So I did everything I could to support him in ministry. We traveled overseas. We backpacked Bibles in the Himalaya mountains. We did all kinds of missions trips all over the world, and then felt called by God to start a church in Washington, D.C. I think all the other was preparation for Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
And so we pastored a church there for 30 years together. Dennis was convinced that he didn't want to do ministry alone. He felt like it needed a mom and a dad, a husband and a wife team. And so just recently, we transitioned the church, and now we are here, part of Shoreline Church.
We're so thankful.
We're so grateful to be here.
It's an answer to prayer.
So that was and now what we're doing is we're just speaking into pastors and other leaders, and excited about it.
We're so grateful. So grateful. Holly?
Well, to be honest, I don't remember a day not loving Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. And so I was just kind of raised that way, but there was also this in me. And but it's different, loving Jesus and making him Lord.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Talk about it.
when I was 21, I was working as an actress in Los Angeles, and that's really when I made him Lord.
Which also, by the way, you should Google Holly Wagner.
Yes.
What was
If
her
you
main
Google,
name?
no, I'm not telling my maiden name. Because there are some things you should not see. Anyway,
I love it.
yeah, so I was working as an actress and then just had to make some decisions about parts that didn't bring God dishonor, right? So I was learning to follow Jesus and lay my life down. And so that was kind of at 21. And then I met Philip shortly after that, and he was in ministry already, and I was still acting, and he didn't quite know what to do with this actress person. And so then he had a Bible study, which I was a part of, and then that became the church, which I was a part of, and then we got married, and then for me, it just evolved, like the calling evolved. I eventually started saying no to the acting things and just felt like God was calling me to ministry. So it was more like helping people and serving people than entertaining them, or at least be entertaining while you're helping them or something.
Right.
Anyway.
You're so fun. You are entertaining while also anointed.
So we did that together for 35 years in the heart of Los Angeles,
Yes.
pastored Oasis Church, and then at the end of 2019 handed that over.
So beautiful.
And then now, just with Donna, I get to speak into the lives of a bunch of young leaders and come alongside and get to travel and just see the breadth of the church, what God
beautiful.
is doing everywhere, which is awesome. And now at Shoreline, we just love being with you guys. So. Because you're family. You're just like family. We've been on vacations together.
Literally.
We've stayed in spaces this big together. So when you
Exactly.
do that,
We've gone shopping together. Just all the things.
all the things.
All the things.
All the things.
I'll never forget when I was in the thick of raising. So my oldest son is 19 and my youngest is 9. Y'all know this. And then my middle son is about to be 14. And that teenage season tried to break me. And I know I get to do it twice again. Pray for me.
Jesus,
but
help us.
I remember when I was in the thick of it with our oldest, who now loves God and is doing great, but went through just a season where he just was not being his best self.
Right.
And I remember calling you on the phone and you just talked me off the cliff and reminded me that he was going to be okay.
Yes.
And sure enough, he's doing great.
Yeah.
But I think about the two of y'all, both who led churches in very tough cities, like leading a church on the heart of LA, leading a church in DC, leading anything, obviously is not for the faint of heart, but those particular cities are not easy cities to plow and to break ground. Now there's many life-giving churches there, but when y'all first started leading there was not as many.
No, there wasn't.
And so what was it like to go first or be one of the first and pioneer in cities and spaces where there wasn't a church on every single corner and people weren't begging you to come? I think now we have a new generation of pioneering where it's a little bit different. It's still tough, but it's not like we're the only ones. So when we moved to Dallas, we weren't the only church here. We're on the standing on the shoulders of so many churches that got here before us.
Right.
But what's it like to go first when no one is begging you to come and it's not popular? Like now it's almost cool to start a church. It's like, what's your merch going to be?
Right.
And what's your launch budget? And it's a little more in style, if you will, for lack of a better word. But when you were doing it, there wasn't someone saying, come to my city.
No.
So what's that like going first? Because I feel like now when we have it a little bit easier, we can learn as we step into this next season of leadership. Anyone listening?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is when you're called to a city, right, then you're graced to be there.
Right.
And so for me, one of the great things about pastoring in a very post-Christian secular city like Los Angeles is that nobody can fake Christian behavior.
Wow.
Whereas I feel like sometimes in the middle of the country or perhaps in the Bible Belt, people know how to act Christian, but inside it's just religious.
Right.
And so in LA, when someone encountered Jesus, their life changed. They didn't know how to act Christian. They just became one.
Whoa.
So for me, that's the refreshing part. And I feel like as a communicator, I learned to speak in an environment that I couldn't get away with religious phrases.
All the Christianese.
I couldn't say any of that. So I had to actually speak the language that people were speaking. And I think that was a benefit to me. So now even traveling, I don't speak Christianese because I didn't grow up.
Right.
So all that to say, yes, it was hard. And yes, there were when we had some of the hard racial conversations, which we've had since the beginning of our church. We've had those from the early days.
Your church always looked like heaven.
Yeah. which is what a gift, right? So from the early days, we had those conversations, and we would get death threats, and so carving ground. It sounds exciting, but there's dangers that come when you do.
Right.
And so I feel like we did experience some of that. Just the challenges. But the rewards. It's like God gives you kisses all along the way.
Right.
So that you stay the course.
It's beautiful.
But I wouldn't have wanted to do it anywhere else, honestly.
Beautiful. I love hearing this. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think also it's knowing where God's called you.
Yeah.
And then and not that it's easy, as you said, there were many times that we felt alone and felt like giving up in the middle of it. But Washington, D.C. as well, not only the racial conversations, but it was really important to us that our church wasn't noted because of its politics, but that you could come from either side of the aisle.
Talk about it.
And we weren't preaching from the pulpit anything but the love of Jesus and the gospel. And so we had people from both sides of the aisle.
Right. It's real life.
In small groups, having conversations and realizing that actually how they would move forward in their life. And transformation was around those places. So agreed with you. Yeah. There was no Christianese. Nobody understood it. We came from the South where we were trained to D.C. and realized very quickly we were speaking a foreign language. Right.
Wow.
And so, but there is no greater joy learning in the middle of some of the most difficult situations.
Yep.
First of all, you find God in a whole new way.
Right.
Than you would when it's easy. And you find that God moves in extraordinary ways. So for every obstacle we faced, when we would see God part the waters, oftentimes not even in the way we expected him to, but even more than we even expected. He would do far beyond. We would then have faith for the next obstacle. I think probably one of the biggest things that we've talked about is it's important to normalize battles are part of your walk with God. I mean, battles are part of life, period.
It's true.
But they're part of your walk with God. And so is pain.
Why are we so surprised, though?
Yes.
When we have to fight a battle and pain comes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the kind of the verses that has, I've kind of wrestled with, over the last few years is this one that in Judges 3, where it tells us that God, this is after the land of promise has been given to them. So they're ready to step into it. Mm-hmm. And it says in those first verses, it says that there were enemies in the land, that God left enemies in the land in order to train a generation who didn't know how to fight.
Wow.
And so I feel like that's a little bit where we are today. Mm-hmm. Like there are enemies in the land, and we've got a generation who's surprised.
Yeah. Right.
Who's surprised, and so doesn't know how to fight, doesn't know how to stand, doesn't know how to stay the course. And we just think it's going to come easy, and it never does.
No.
Right.
No.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it makes us who we are. I remember when Earl and I moved here, 12 years ago. And one of your best friends, we were a part of their church for 12 years. It's called Shoreline in Austin. And I remember being on the staff there. We were executive pastors. We started off as, young adult pastors and took a bite of every single thing. Mm-hmm. 1 minute we're over worship, another minute young adults, another minute over youth, another minute over that plus worship, another minute all behind the scenes, another minute up front, another minute helping plan women's conferences, and just getting all that dirt underneath our nails, learning how to host a wedding and lead at a wedding, learning funerals and how do you support and grieve with a family, and just cutting our teeth on everything that was put in front of us. So when God called us to Dallas, I remember thinking, okay, we're ready. We've had 12 years of experience serving such an amazing church and amazing leaders. We got this. I've seen them do it, so surely we can do it. So we moved here. And it about took us out because we had to fight our own battles. Yeah. We got to witness our pastors fight battles, but we were not fighting them the way that we thought that we were till we got here, moved here. It felt
Surprise.
Like exactly the spiritual warfare. And it felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath us in terms of how difficult it was. Yeah. And it was attack after attack, battle after battle. And I remember thinking, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Yeah. I thought Dallas was going to just welcome us with open arms, that we would just say, come to church, and people would come from the north, south, east, and west. And I realized, and that's when I learned the power of prayer and needing a prayer covering, but also it was the battles that still that have built Earl and I. Yes. And now we have this conviction and this fire and this passion and this grit that would not have come had it been super easy for us.
It's the only way you get grit.
Yeah.
Right.
Is by persevering. Persevering through the hard things.
Well, I love, Paul said, I apprehend or I grab hold of that for which I've been grabbed hold of for. And so I think the mental picture I always see is that Jesus is holding on to me while I reach out for what he's created and purposed me to do, what he's called me to do. But I also think that we may not always realize while we're being held, it's the most beautiful picture that whatever battle you face, because when you're going to move forward, there's immediately a battle. In fact, David was anointed to be king, and the first thing he faced was a Goliath. And it's just obvious that to me now, this far along in my life, every battle I face, I choose to see it not as an intimidator, but as an indicator.
Wow.
And so we have to choose. So when fear starts, it immediately tells me, okay, if I start feeling fearful, wait a minute, what's behind that fear? Or if I start feeling anxiety, or I still start feeling less than, then what's behind that? Because the enemy's trying to hide. That's an indicator that the enemy is hiding something that the battle's trying to destroy in me or stop me from doing. Because when I grab a hold of it, I'm dangerous to hell. And so are you, and so we are.
That's right.
I mean,
so I feel like there is this generation who, that in many ways maybe we did a disservice. We helicopter parented you. And so,
and you made it look easy.
And we made it look easy. And so we
because we weren't vulnerable or authentic.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's only been in the last decade that we've gone, let me tell you the truth about what it is. And so I feel like that's our bad. Like we didn't actually paint the picture of what the battles actually are and look like, and they can possibly take you out if you don't do this. And so I don't think we painted that picture very clearly, which now we are. We're painting because I feel like there's this fear in me of like, oh, Jesus, if we don't actually teach this generation to stand up and fight, we're going to lose the progress that the church has made. So like, we gotta help them. Like the armor that he talks about in Ephesians 6, that's not,
come on.
It's like, if you don't put that on and keep it on, you're not going to make it.
Exactly.
It's not in there just because it sounds cool.
Exactly. Like we have to have it.
You have to have it.
To wear the armor that God has for you in the season you're in. Because when David went to fight Goliath, Saul tried to put his armor on David, but David was like, I can't wear something that doesn't fit me. So I think part of the battle is we compare what I'm walking through with somebody else, or on social media. They're not like, maybe they thought it was easy for us, but it wasn't. You have to wear what you're wearing right now that God's given you for this season. Because when David defeated Goliath, what he took from Goliath was Goliath's sword. Later on in life, when David's fighting another battle, what does he use? Goliath's sword.
Wow.
So the very same tool that the enemy tries to use, whether it's comparison, fear, anxiety, whatever, against you, when you defeat the enemy, then God will use the story and the testimony of that old battle to defeat the enemy in the current battle. So you can't miss what God is trying to show you right now. And so we can isolate ourselves or shut up, and we feel less than. We're like, well, look at Pastor Oneka. She's like, you get up there and you open your mouth and heaven opens up on Sunday mornings. And I love that. But the girl sitting in the pew might be like, if I was Pastor Oneka, then I could overcome my battles. But God's given you the tools, girl, wherever you are right now to overcome your battle. Right. I mean, we're just talking about battles right now, but we have to normalize.
Don't you think? You have to normalize the fight.
The fight, exactly.
You have to normalize the fight. And that we don't wrestle with flesh and blood. Like we're not wrestling with flesh and blood.
Yeah. Right.
It feels like it.
Right.
Like my enemy is not the person I live with, although sometimes
it
feels like he's my enemy.
Exactly.
It's not the person on social media who's posting stupid things. They're not my enemy.
Right.
Although it feels like it sometimes.
Exactly.
And so I think sometimes we engage. And so this is why it gets so frustrating as people engage, even in social media, they engage in fights. And what that does is take the energy away from the fights that are yours to fight.
Yes.
Exactly.
So then when it is time for you to fight, you don't have any energy because you've been fighting the stupid things that you shouldn't be.
So
exactly.
good,
and looking for fights. If you get deep, you can you can look for fights, and then they will find you. Something that I've watched you both steward really well is influence. I feel like there's been more and more leaders who haven't been able to handle influence well and stay in it for a long time. And I've watched you both steward influence really, really well. I didn't get a chance to go to your church in DC, but I was at your church in LA and watching people from all walks of life come in, watching people that if it were today, they would be like influencers with millions of followers watching you in the Dolby Theater, which was not normal to have a women's conference, like in the heart of LA at a place where they have like the Oscars or whatever show, you know what I mean? Like that was not normal. But you've been on TV and just all this different attention and favor that has followed you both. But you both have stayed so down to earth, so humble, so fun, so filled with Jesus, and it hasn't changed you. And so I do feel like lots of people have influence in this generation right now, but I don't know if we know how to carry it and steward it so where it doesn't take us out. Can you speak to not letting it just take you out?
Yeah. For me, one of the pictures is just about fame. It's this people have this longing for
this
fame.
Thirst.
And so this thirst for it. But it's not, our DNA can't handle it. Yeah, like just like our DNA can't handle living underwater either.
Right.
Our DNA is not designed for fame. Only He is famous.
So good.
And so but we all want to be successful at whatever we do. Whether we're doctors or attorneys or actors, you want to be successful at it. Yeah. And so if at some point in the quietness of your own soul, you don't deflect it to Him, then you start to believe it, that it's about you. And then you can't feed that beast enough. It's like, so then it's like the next thing and the next drug and the next, that applause isn't enough. I need more applause. And so it becomes this hunger for it. And so I think living in LA, I saw that just how many marriages implode that are in some form of the entertainment industry and honestly ministry is not that different, right? So you're on a platform and you're getting people who are acknowledging you, and so you have to decide who you're in this for. And so I had that conversation with myself a lot of years ago, just like, who are you in this for? And it's interesting because I like that you use the word influence, because I actually think we're supposed to be salt and light. We're supposed to be influencing.
We are.
We are. Yes. But it's the motive behind it.
Right.
And if I'm, figuring out how can I get more followers on Instagram, you're missing the point.
Right.
It's like you live your life.
Say it.
And trust that what God's given you, you put your hand down. Like I think so many times we get very distracted by like the big dream in our heart.
Right.
And so we overlook actually what's in my hand right now to do.
So good.
And so then we miss the whole point.
Say it.
We miss it. So I just think that the need today that people have for fame is really the cry of significance. And so if people would understand they already are significant.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
You already are significant. You are unique, one of a kind, significant, just how you are. There's nothing you need to add to that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think God's created humans to be famous.
Nope.
And so I think there is this God-designed need in us to want to be seen.
Right.
And if we don't direct that to the intimacy of relationship that we are seen by God, then we feel like the fulfillment will come by being seen by others.
That's right.
And then it comes down to you start feeling entitled to more, and you forget what you've been entrusted with. And there's a huge difference between entitlement and entrustment. And I think a significant factor of entitlement is when you start feeling like you're not significant because you don't have people following you or people don't see you. It should be a huge alarm system inside of you to immediately run to Jesus and say to Him, hey, I'm not feeling seen right now.
Wow.
I need you to talk to me.
Wow.
And actually ask for that conversation, because it is innate to humanity.
Exactly.
It's a common temptation for all of us.
You're right.
And when I think that is a huge battle when God starts giving you platform, it becomes a test. What are you going to do with the platform God builds? And are you okay if nobody knows your name?
Right.
That.
And you remain anonymous and nobody sees what you're doing.
Yeah.
And with everyone, we're in a season where everyone's just seeming to blow up overnight.
Yes.
And then that becomes like the norm in the way. I remember
but then they blow up overnight.
Exactly. Yes.
You know what I mean?
You're right. You're right.
So for me, when I think about like just longevity.
That's what we're talking about. Yep.
Just like staying the course. Yeah. When I think about like what is it that I would say, because this is not, people ask that question, because when we handed over our church by the grace of God, it was, and somebody said this, one of our board members said to us during the transition ceremony to the guy who was receiving it, he said, you understand you're being handed something with an untarnished name.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I just went, Lord. And then Philip and I went, whew. good thing we didn't hang on to it 5 years longer. We might have messed it up.
Wow.
I don't know. But I just think, so what is it? And it's not, that's not like, I'm not patting myself on the back. I am very aware. It's just the grace of God and me taking one step after the other and not abandoning when it would have been so easy to abandon. So I'm very aware of that. But when I think about, like, what is it that, why is it? Like, what is it that helps me stay the course? Well, there's a couple things. I think it's genuine community. And I feel like genuine friendship where you tell the truth. Because I feel like the reason so many times, whether it's people or ministries, I think one of the things that's missing is that they have no one that they can tell their honest struggle.
You're so right.
Because they have to keep this face on. And I just think
of perfection.
Yes. And that's not, it's not real. Nobody is. And so, but you feel like people be disappointed if they knew the real you, which is just nonsense. And so I feel like that's one of the things that, again, by God's grace, I learned early on is I want to have real friends.
Yes. Yeah.
People that see the good, the bad, the ugly, that challenge me about things, that say things to me, because I'll never make it if I don't.
Right.
And so I wasn't interested in just doing stuff on my own because you will not make it. And then I think I got convicted, probably while I was in grad school, actually, that I was really good at doing, but I was not that good at being.
Whoa.
And so I'm much more of a doer. That's just my nature, my personality. And so I got challenged about just some of the disciplinary practices, whether it's solitude and I'm not a solitude girl. Right. But finding that, like learning to be content in those moments. And so I had to do some of my own spiritual disciplines, is what we would call it, the technical term, but just like what that means to me, like really going in my own soul so that it can stay healthy.
Yeah. Right.
Like asking a friend going, what do you see in me?
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so are you being brave enough to ask? So when I think about longevity, I just
talk about
there's probably other things, but those are just like the two things that came off kind of the top of my head. So when people don't engage in community and church, whether it's small groups, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
You're asking for trouble because who does the enemy go after? Not the pack. He goes after the lone one.
Yeah. That's by themselves.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you probably have some good ideas about staying the course.
Wow.
Well, I would say the same thing. I also, the whole idea of community, I think, is important. Is community sometimes is messy just because we're not perfect.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so I think staying the course is becoming committed to being part of community, even though there may be painful conversations. Like we have been friends for 20 years? 100 years.
Feels like 100.
I love it.
But it's been one of the greatest joys. But we've also been willing to have good, honest,
conversations,
safe conversations that were
powerful.
Sometimes painful for each other, but we push through all that stuff. And the joy and the gold of that is well worth all of that. And so I think we get maybe offended too easily.
Oh, wow. Can you talk on that? I think we just need to stay there for a second.
Okay. So it's super easy. I think the enemy sets traps in front of us, and so then we become offended, and we're like, okay, I'm going to set up. Boundaries are important. Boundaries for healthy living are important. But if we're not careful, we can boundary ourselves right out of it.
So it becomes a barrier.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
We've talked about this.
Yes.
Like you decide, a barrier just shuts you out of everybody. Yep. A boundary keeps your life healthy.
Right.
But a barrier means I'm not going to become, I've been hurt once, and then all of a sudden it becomes like a magnet. You start seeing everything through that offense. And if you're not careful, then you shut yourself down and you'll never let anybody get super close to you. But healthy living is you have to have tender heart. You can't just become hardened to other people.
Yeah. Right.
There's been a million, in leadership, just in life, it's in marriage, in relationship.
Yes.
There's a million things that could be offensive that you hold on to that I think are the trap of the enemy to keep us from healthy living. But I think we're moving into a very tense season in our country. Well, it's tense right now, so we have to choose what lens are we going to see through.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, this is a really interesting thing because, this is where the church is just such it's His kingdom that He's building.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and so we have to be very careful about. it's not a Republican kingdom.
No.
It's not a Democratic
That's right.
kingdom.
Say
it's
it.
his kingdom.
Exactly.
And so when we use this holy message that God's entrusted to us and say it in any other way except Jesus is building his kingdom and he loves you just the way you are, then we're missing it.
Exactly.
Like when we try to wrap the Bible in
our
an
job
American flag.
it's not our job. It is not our job.
Yeah.
It is not our job. It's our job to lead people to Jesus.
Yes. Just love people.
Exactly.
And let the Holy Spirit do what the Holy Spirit's going to do.
Exactly.
And love people.
But I think probably for Holly and I think you have to get to the place where you are unoffendable.
Oh,
yes. Say
Paul
it.
talks about that
please,
too.
Please say it.
And quick to apologize. And so I think that
helps with anything.
Like just recently, Donna knows this, somebody just came at me really strongly and it was kind of over the top. And I was like, whoa, okay. So then rather than engaging in a text battle, which that's always an option, but it never is good.
It's never good.
I was like, okay, so we have a Zoom call. We'll get on Zoom and
we'll work this out.
Talk about it. But you have to be willing to hear. Now I knew the tone of what they did was wrong, but I go, I need to hear. What is it that's
the heart of what you're saying?
Holly.
Yeah.
The heart of what they're saying. And so I actually heard some things and I went, actually, I'm really sorry I said that because I didn't mean it like that. Let me tell you how I meant it. But if I had been just committed to being offended, I would never have engaged in that conversation. I never would have taken a step toward unity with that person.
Wow.
And so I think sometimes we let offense, we get so hooked by it and trapped by it, we just go, next.
Right.
Yes.
And I just don't think that that's the Jesus way.
No, it is not.
Yeah, and
that's so healthy.
One more thing to that.
Shared.
Can we just one more thing I want to add is that our brains are wired to assume.
Right.
And so if we're not careful, we immediately go into assumption mode that I'm assuming that you meant A, B, C, D by what you just said or did. And what I love about the example that Jesus set, when Jesus asked or recorded 300 questions that Jesus asked. Well, Jesus didn't ask those questions because he needed an answer. He knew that asking questions would help the other person, us, think. I think we should become more like Jesus and ask more questions than we defend.
Instead of telling people what to do, asking the questions.
So what are you saying by that? Help me to understand.
What do you mean by that?
Where are you right now? Just talk to me. Where are you in your head right now? I want to understand where you're coming from rather than defending what I'm trying to say. And I think that would shift everything. So I've tried
Which is what's happening right now, even in our culture, right? Nobody's asking the questions.
The questions, exactly.
We're just all spouting off what we think.
And popping off,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
But we're doing it different because after this conversation, in Jesus' name, we're all going to be set free. We're going to be set free.
So good.
Wow, this is gold. The whole time I'm listening to you both talk, this is what's going through my mind. I can't believe this is happening right now. I cannot believe it. I'm going to go back and listen to this myself. This is pure gold. As we wrap soon, I wanted to ask you a couple questions about just being a woman in leadership and also motherhood. I want to speak to motherhood for a quick second because I think sometimes on this journey, I've watched women who have become moms all of a sudden think that that's their only passion in life. And I love being a mom. Don't get me wrong. I'm obsessed with my kids. They're amazing. Some of my highest highs and also lowest lows.
Yes, 100%. There's no pain like kid pain. No pain like kid pain.
Yeah. No. But I do feel like I'm seeing a generation of moms who are thinking that if they do everything perfect, so if they do the right food, if they do if they take these supplements for their breast milk, if they do this certain school, if they use these certain non-toxic plastic containers for lunch, if their home has a certain flow to cultivate learning. And I'm just seeing there's this new trend in us as mothers controlling every outcome and controlling the environment, believing and laying our life down thinking that that's going to equal that our kids are going to be perfect and leaders and run the world. And you both have adult children, and you have loved your kids through every season.
I'm just laughing at all the things that you're saying.
It's so real.
We didn't even know about those things.
It's a whole thing. I mean, it is like a whole culture. Yeah. It's a motherhood culture, but it's very. Yeah. It's the beautiful part about it is yes, we do give our all and our best to our kids, but the toxic, detrimental part of it is it's taking women out because it's becoming works parenting and fear-based. Well, that's the point. I just want you to speak to that to set some moms free today who can still, I don't want them to hear, but what I love my kids. We're not saying love your kids, be obsessed with your kids, but can you just speak to the control part of motherhood for a second?
Okay, listen. Adam and Eve had a perfect father.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they made a choice.
Yeah.
He was perfect.
Wow.
and they made a choice. And so for us to think that all the works that we do to create a perfect environment and our kids at some point still don't have to choose life or death, still don't have to choose, well, then we're delusional.
Right. Wow.
We stop. You can't control the world or their world so much that ultimately they're not going to have to make a choice.
Yeah.
And as a woman, it's like before I was a wife, before I was a mother, I was a loved beyond measure daughter of the King. Called.
Say it.
And anointed.
Yeah.
And so as a wife is a role I have.
Yeah.
It's a partnership, a lifetime partnership. Mother is a role I have.
Right.
For life.
Yep.
It's not who I am.
Wow.
Good.
Right? And so I think sometimes we feel like the reason, like my kids are adult, they're out of the house. But if I had made them my whole world, what would I be doing right now?
Right.
I would have lost it.
Wow.
I would have been depressed. No, but because I knew who I was, then when they grew up, I could encourage them to find their purpose and fulfill the call of God on their life. Now, I'm not saying don't have great things around your house and don't have all the non-toxic stuff. I'm all about the non-toxic stuff.
Yes.
You know, and make sure they go to great school, all the things. But I just think sometimes what you were saying at the root of that is fear.
Yeah.
And that's
And
right.
fear is, you're not going to produce anything good out of fear.
Right.
So anyway, those are some thoughts
This
I
is
have.
holy.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you speak into it as well?
Yeah, I remember one night, we had 4 children, and I remember one night, it had been a really rough day, putting the kids to bed. When they're sleeping, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm the worst mother in the world, because they're perfect when they're sleeping.
Right.
And I've lost my stuff all day long with them. And I remember saying, God, I'm just like the most imperfect. And he said, I know. There is no perfect parenting. There is no perfect mother. He said, I am the only perfect parent.
Right.
And I was like, well, I'm just overwhelmed because I can't control how they're acting. And I don't even seem to know how to make the day more perfect than it is. And he said, just make sure you invite me into it. Invite the perfect parent into everything you're doing. I am the perfect parent. So if you invite me into your day and you invite me into those moments that are overwhelming and into those moments where you feel overwhelmed, I'll be there. And so what I've seen and you've seen with our kids is I'm so in love with my children. I'm obsessed with them as adults, but they've all had their own journeys.
Yes.
Right.
And them learning how to make choices was important. So the second thing that God spoke to me in that moment was make sure they know my voice more than they know your voice.
Okay. Let's just stay there for just a second.
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah. So I think it's important. Oftentimes we think that our children should know right and wrong from what we tell them, but I wanted my kids to understand the conviction of the Holy Spirit so that when they got older, it's just like Samuel, right?
Yes.
Samuel had to learn to hear the voice of God so that when they're 4 years old, and how I taught them when they're little was, they know when they do something wrong.
Right.
So I would say to them, you're not bad. But was that the wrong choice? Yes. Well, guess who was guiding you in that choice? Or when they did the right thing, when they shared a toy, did you know that was Jesus inspiring you to do that? So that when they became teenagers, I wasn't the first 2, there's 12 years between them. I was helicopter mom, so I told them what to do.
Yep.
Like, no, don't go to that party. No. Yep. Well, I wanted the second set of kids. I got a second chance.
I love this. I love this. Yes.
Then I was able to say to the second 2, let's pray about it. You ask God, should you be going to that party? Now, obviously, there were some things that they did that I didn't feel was the right thing, but as long as danger wasn't involved, they went, and then they discovered, oh, okay, that's how I'm going to learn to hear the voice of God. So that now all of them are acquainted with the voice of God and are guiding their life, no matter how far they've gone and come back.
Sure.
It's the voice of Jesus.
It's like there's somebody in my world that basically tried to control. I mean, not just homeschooled, which homeschooling is great. So I'm not dissing that.
No,
but not just homeschool them, but try to control everything in their world, every person they saw. And so all of that did was when they became 19 and 20 is rebel.
Right.
Because they had been so controlled.
Right.
So that's not what we want to happen.
No, not at all.
Right? Your kids are going to have their own journey. And so, here we were today at Shoreline, and my, 36-year-old son, 35, how old he is, can't remember. Anyway,
I love it.
Sitting next to me with his hands raised. So that's the prize.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? When your adult children have their own revelation of Jesus, which they didn't get because I told them. I created the environment.
The space.
Right.
Yeah, and I
So
think that's
good.
it. We asked our kids daily, what is God speaking to you? And, when they're teenagers, they're rolling their eyes and they're like, whatever.
Yep.
But I feel like every time you ask your child, what is God speaking to you, whether they want to, whether they respond or not, you're kind of like digging a trench, is the way I see it, for then God to begin to flow. So then they begin to think, oh, God does speak to me. Or when they read the word, what did God speak to you? So anyways,
Pure
that
gold.
for me was the gold.
Yep.
And now you're talking about your son worshiping God. To me, the prize is also watching your grandchildren, worship God.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the prize.
I can't take this. This is so good. Last question is, what is your advice for single girls who are not married, who are considering or teetering with settling or playing with fire? Ready, set, go.
Well, first of all, single isn't a disease. It's a season.
Right.
Right? And if God's given you a desire for a family, then he's not going to give you a counterfeit.
Good.
Right?
Good job.
He's
so good.
He's
good.
I also don't believe there's one person for you. I think that's ridiculous
talk about
thought. No, I mean, when people say God has one person, I just don't think that, because that means in the world, if one person messed up, there goes for everybody.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So I think they're probably multiple. So you get to, there's some part of it where you get to choose. So you decide what's the important qualities for you.
Yeah.
Right? You get to choose.
Yes.
So for me, like obviously a lover of God, but I needed to know he was a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
That part.
Because it's easy to sit in church. There's like crazy people in church. They know how to do the thing.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
will they stay faithful? So it's like seeing somebody, if he's really being led by Jesus, like making the hard decision. So that's more important. And then for me, a sense of humor. You got to laugh, because that's the way I think also I've stayed in this long term.
I love this. How many years have you each been married?
It'll be 40 for me in January.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
40, beautiful.
40.
I love this.
40 plus.
But 40 plus.
40
I love
plus.
it.
Yeah, 43,
gold.
I think. Yeah.
So gold.
Yeah.
What about you? Any advice for single girls or girls that are about to settle or considering settling because they're just tired of doing the right thing and waiting?
Yeah, I think first of all, what I would encourage you to do as a single girl is write out a list of values, not just a list of what you want in a husband, but what are your personal values in life, so that when you begin looking for a guy, you're able to see if his values match up with yours.
Yes.
So good.
And so they may be slightly different, but those core beliefs. And my marriage would never have worked for the 40 plus years that it has without us having Jesus at the center. And so I can't imagine, like, yes,
100%.
I don't believe that you can like date somebody and you want to be the missionary who's going to win them over to Jesus.
Right.
Like maybe bring them to church before you start dating them and see how they
good.
connect. But anyways, I would just say wait. Don't settle for less. God has something so excellent for you. And there's nothing greater than being connected emotionally, spiritually, physically. And I just think it's important that you have all those connections and that you're not losing the spiritual one, because that's the one that ties everything else.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well said.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow. Thank you both so much. We have to do this again because
We'll
I
do
have
it
a
again,
million
'cause here
more
we are.
questions. So promise me that you'll come back, because this was gold.
We'll do it again.
Thank you. I love that this conversation isn't just for this moment, but these are conversations that I get to have with each of you as I continue to grow and to learn. And I'm just going to continue to sit at tables with you both, because I'm on the potter's wheel and I want to be all that God's called me to be. And thank you for helping me equip the girls as well.
you.
Girls, I pray that this blessed you, encouraged you. Send this to a friend. We're on this journey together. God is not done with you yet, and stay the course. Love you. Mwah.
Bye.